It's time for a brand new show on KCAA, The Uncommon Sense Democrat, with your host, Eric Bauman, a show about politics and contemporary issues. And now, here's Eric Bauman.
Well, good cloudy afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have two parts of the show today. The first half is kind of designed to educate everybody about the impact of artificial intelligence, primarily in the entertainment industry, although I may take it in a slightly different direction if my guest doesn't mind. And then the second half of the show, we're going to spend talking about the results from yesterday's elections. So, very brief healthcare report. The latest Center for Disease Control report says that about 98% of the U.S. population has some level of immunity to COVID, either because they've been vaccinated, had an infection, or both. But health experts say this only gives some protection against the infection or severe disease. So, as I think I mentioned last week, the CDC is recommending that people that 65 or older get an additional dose of the new vaccine. Remember, the most important thing the vaccine does is it keeps you from getting... This is Eric Bauman, host of the Uncommon Sense Democrat, right here on NBC Radio, KCAA, AM 1050 in Loma Linda and across Southern California, FM 106.5 in Redlands and across the Inland Empire. And I'm joined by Chris Robles, who's a political consultant and who for 8 years, I believe, was the chair of the San Bernardino County Democratic Party. And we're going to talk about with the results of yesterday's elections. Now, I think we may be joined at some point by Mark Westwood.
Conjoined.
Who is the... Oh, okay. We're joined by Mark Westwood, who's the general manager of KCAA and a former vice chair of the San Bernardino County Democratic Party. And there's some interesting things, but I've got to ask you guys a question to start with. Did Connie Leyva run for the state senate again?
No.
No, not that
No.
In the results that I read, she ran in District 20 and got 66.14%. Now, these results were straight out of today's San Bernardino paper.
That's got to be a mistake.
20, and and I'm looking at the state results, and 20 is not up. It's all odds.
So they're looking at the wrong year.
Oh, you know what? I see that, and they've got all evens. All right, well, this paper, with these results that I have, I'll just shove aside.
I've got the results here, by the way. Ask me, I wrote them all down.
I do, too. Hey, Mark.
Okay.
Hello.
So, guys, let's start off by talking about things from the top in California. If there's some time at the end, because we could talk through this for the whole half an hour. The Senate race kind of turned out as was probably very predictable. Adam Schiff was always in first place, and he spent a good $10 million promoting, well, let's say attacking our former Dodger, former Padres player by saying, "Oh, well, he's too conservative for California, and he voted twice for Trump," knowing that would activate the Republicans to come out and vote. And sure enough, that was true. Katie Porter, who was likely the second Democrat, ended up with 14.5% or thereabouts. And Barbara Lee from Oakland got about 7% of the vote. Tell me your thoughts about that and about that technique of sort of using distractive advertising to pick your opponent.
Well, it's done more frequently than people realize. Most people don't pay attention to the source of the ad, which by law is getting bigger and bigger on whatever the material is. So if it's a television ad or printed ad, the information that has to be provided has been increased by the state here, the FPPC, but people just don't pay attention to it. So they are paying attention to the message. The message is pounded into people with that spending you just talked about, Mark. I'm sorry, Eric, and it just goes past people, and it also interestingly suppresses people. I had some conversations today with what I'd call normal people, and they are turned off by the spending, but some people will be so turned off they don't bother to vote at all, and that's not a solution.
Yeah.
It was
Mark,
effective.
what are your thoughts about it?
It was certainly effective if the pundits are true and correct, and that was actually, I can't speak in firsthand, or I don't have any firsthand knowledge of this other than to estimate and assume that that's what Adam Schiff did. It certainly had that same result, and of which we talked about, and Garvey far outdid Porter and Lee together, and now Schiff will just pound Garvey in the general in November and have no problem putting him away. We can probably, I'm going to jump the gun and start calling him Senator Schiff, because that's what's going to be. I predicted it yesterday on the show. I said, although I thought it was going to be a little closer than, I thought Porter would give Garvey a little bit more of a run for his money, but actually not. Garvey did pretty well thanks to Adam Schiff.
And it wasn't that she didn't spend money.
No.
I mean, she was about $6 million behind Schiff. But if you saw her commercials, they were so poorly done.
Yeah.
I was shocked at the quality.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
I'm looking at a report here that says Schiff spent $44.8 million in ads and Porter $18.6 million.
Well, no, that's Schiff didn't spend $44 million. He had outside groups that were spending for him. And by the way, Katie Porter had some. But listen, Schiff spent of his own money. When I say his own money, I don't mean from out of his pocket. I mean from his political action committee. He spent probably probably $22 million. And the thing is,
here.
What her ads were, and I hate to be critical so quickly after an election, but I was critical during the election. There were these rapid flashes of images and verbiage. And the first thing is that the average voter looks at that, they can't read what's written on those screens, and it's just distractive. So what do?
They couldn't decode it.
If you're watching television or a cable show and you see that ad, what do? You just mute it, or you fly through it.
Yeah, they couldn't decode it, and they didn't want to take the time to do that. The average viewer or listener, for that matter, doesn't take the time to do that. So you got to keep it real simple, straight, and to the point. I have to add this in there, and I just thought it was amusing to watch the coverage last night, because I was watching Channel 5 KTLA part of the time, and they were out in Palm Desert at the Garvey campaign election night watch party. And, all those little Republicans got so excited. The Republicans haven't had anything to get excited about in California for probably 2 decades. And now they got Steve Garvey, and they thought, oh, we got it. And they really don't get what happened to them and what's going to happen now. So they had their night in the sun. They had their heyday.
Well,
and this
I think there's
a result of the top 2 primary, or the open jungle primary that we have.
I know we've all taken to using the term jungle primary. I don't use that term because, frankly, I think it's racist. Or let me say it differently. It's perceived as being racist by certain people. So I just don't use that term. Mm-hmm. But regardless, I think that the way our top 2 elections go, let me step back for a second. When the top 2 was being voted on, what the people were promised is that this style of election would help elect more moderate Democrats and Republicans. And it hasn't proven to be true at all. No. And so you have many instances where it's 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans. I mean, in the Inland Empire, there were a number of races that were 2 Republicans. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if there were any that were 2 Democrats or not. But it has not had the promised effect. And one of the things that I often say is, in California, we have this reform phenomenon where everybody wants all this election reform. So they vote in an election reform, whether it's top 2 or whether it's the redistricting commission or whatever it happens to be. And a year later or 2 years later, they're talking about the next reform. They haven't even given the thing that we just voted in a chance to work or not work. And I thought the top 2 was going to fail from the beginning. I was never at all surprised about that. And I've been proven right. But this has been the case over and over and over again. And part of it is people, well, especially on the Democratic side, we have these what I call good government Democrats. And they don't think about the impact of what they're doing on winning elections, which is okay, if you're coming up with some pure result, some pure outcome. But when you do it and you're a Democrat, but you're not doing anything to support Democrats, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
And that's maddening. Before we go to local IE races, there were a few interesting things in the presidential races.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden lost one big place. He lost Guam. a guy that nobody has ever heard of had more people in his caucus, I guess you would call it, and he beat Biden.
And caucuses aren't elections.
And considering they don't even have electoral college votes. So, but Trump, on the other hand, did get beaten in Vermont, right, in Vermont. But Nikki Haley evaluated her circumstance last night and could not any longer see a path forward. So this morning she politely bowed out of the race, but she did not endorse Trump.
Which points to me
further infuriated Trump. And so I think that because he personalizes everything, and so he was fuming about that last night or this morning.
Well, I have a question for you, Eric. What do you think about this? Do you think because she didn't endorse Donald Trump that maybe she's considering an independent run for president?
Well, this is the big question, because she has still well more than $10 million,
mm-hmm.
which would be more than enough to start a run. But the problem, look, superficially, I like Nikki Haley. She has a good personality. She's well-spoken, certainly bright. But when you listen to her start talking about the issues, she's actually more conservative than Trump is.
Yeah.
And you can't. People don't catch that.
Well, she has said over and over and over again that she thinks she could beat Joe Biden. And so she may, I think, be the independent candidate. And she's gotten 40%, 38%, 42% of the vote in a lot of cases of those primaries and some caucuses. And she very well could just drain that off of Trump. And maybe a few Democrats, too.
She's probably looking at that, Mark, but part of it, and she's clearly been making that calculation all along, is her survival in the Republican Party, which is why she pulled her punches and didn't really go after Trump until towards the end here.
Yeah, well, I think if you're a Haley fan, the fact that she chose to handle it that way probably hurt her campaign.
Yes,
if she had, because she started to go up when she started taking on Trump. So let's come. And by the way, I don't want to hear about RFK Jr. because he's a lunatic. And when you listen to him talk, whether it's about vaccines or whatever particular topic it is, you realize This guy is not made for prime time, but he's got that name, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and so he gets a lot of attention. So let's before I want to make sure we have some time. We're getting low. Let's talk about races in the IE. How did Will Rollins do?
Will is going to be.
That season.
He's being advanced, and he'll run against Ken Calvert. He did very decent
And
came within 10%, and he's going to be okay. I think it was kind of a replay of the 2020, or maybe the 2022 election. The 2022 election he was in, almost the same thing. So it's going to be interesting if he can pull ahead of Calvert. Of course, the Republicans are going to spend a lot of money in that race now, but it's absurd that he will go on into November. So that's a good thing.
yeah.
The voter turnout in San Bernardino County was only 1,166,305 votes. And
12%.
Wow.
12%. And in San Bernardino, once again, council candidates won. A couple of them won over 50%, which means they're not going to have a runoff. They won with like 1,600 votes. I think the highest one was 1,635 votes. The whole district ward is like 15,000 plus. I mean, just abysmal. And so, we look at these numbers in San Bernardino County, and it's just like, the good thing is more Democrats in San Bernardino County voted than Republicans. 472,000 some odd to 346,000. But there's also a huge nonpartisan vote, no party preference vote of 263,000. So this is going to be an interesting election coming up, especially in San Bernardino County.
Right. All right. So we know that Will is an important candidate because he is potentially a congressional seat, and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is already committed to him. So they're going to come in and make sure that he has more than enough money. And they have a lot more money than the Republicans do. So now the next question is, how did Halstage do?
She did pretty well. She is advancing as well. And again, it was a very close race between her and Greg Wallace in the primary, which is a good sign because Greg Wallace is the incumbent, protecting that sports and recreation appointment he has on the legislative committee. But, she did well. These are Riverside County races, by the way, out in Palm Springs. But, she did well. She did well. And then Derek Marshall will advance as well against incumbent Jay Obernolte, but he's got some making up to do, 62 to 33%. So that's the way that.
Yeah, well, that's an amount you don't just flip around.
Right. Yeah.
What about and you'll have to forgive me, I can't think of the name right now. The
Pete Aguilar
would be the. No. I know how.
Pete
I know
did
how
great.
Pete did.
56%. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no. Remember, Pete was my intern and then worked for me. So.
And just looking for sunshine.
Yeah. No. He's made me very proud.
Yeah.
And as the caucus chair, he's. Well, I don't know if that's his current title since they're in the minority now, which they better turn around quick. No. The trans candidate,
Lisa Middleton.
Say again.
Lisa Middleton.
Lisa Middleton, who, if she won, would be the first because the other trans candidate that was running in the Sacramento area, Evan Minton, apparently doesn't make the runoff.
So Lisa Middleton and Rosalisa Bowe will be in a runoff in November. But there's a deficit there, too. 61% for Rosalisa Bowe, who is the incumbent Republican, and 39% for Lisa Middleton. So that's going to be a tough.
Those are very hard numbers to come back from.
Mm-hmm. But you know,
unless you have something that is suppressing Republican turnout, and that's kind of the thing that can do it, and it has been proven over and over again. If there's something suppressive, there's a chance there. Well, I was hoping for her because she's a talented politician and well-spoken and had a good record in Palm Springs. So I was hopeful for her.
Well, and before we leave here, I want to jump in and congratulate Chris Robles, who made the Democratic Central Committee with over 5,000 votes. Congratulations, Chris. You're at the top of the rung there.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Wow, Chris, you want to go back there again? Shall we start? Shall we put your campaign for chair together now?
Well, the current chair didn't get elected to the Central Committee.
Text.
The current chair did not get elected to the Central Committee. She didn't win a race.
Oh.
She came in like 7th or 8th. So that's an interesting thing, huh?
She placed last.
Last. Well, I was trying to be nice. So, congratulations, Chris.
I'm going to withhold my chuckles.
Okay. You're more than welcome to do that. She's a nice lady. She is really a nice lady. I like her. But, yeah.
Well,
that's the way
there's a lot that happened yesterday, and we're kind of at the end of our time, but we've covered a lot of stuff. Oh, one thing, Mark, what were the results of Prop 1?
Prop 1, I wrote it down, too. And she's talking about San Bernardino County? Just in San Bernardino County alone?
No, statewide.
Prop 1 won. It did win. It did pass. I can't give you the exact numbers.
Okay.
It didn't pass.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Eric Bauman, host of the Uncommon Sense Democrat, right here on NBC Radio KCAA. I'm joined by Chris Robles, political consultant, and Mark Westwood, who thinks he's the general manager of the station. I don't know.
Yeah. Robles.
Right.
Congratulations to him.
And in any case, thank you all for joining us on what is now a very cloudy afternoon. And Eric, take us away.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda.